Hello, I'm Chris Moon, a fellow artist manager, and I'll be your guide through tough love, adventures, and artist management. Today marks a new chapter, or rather, season, in tough love. We move beyond our first season theme of origin stories and are embarking on a new theme called pivots. To kick this off, I've invited my old friend and fellow colleague at Nettwerk Management, Michael Corcoran, to join me. Michael is now at mtheory, an artist management services company of sorts that amplifies and assists artist managers in the marketing and developing of artists. He started his career as a tour manager before becoming an artist manager, where he worked with a wide variety of various artists, including Jars of Clay, Alexi Murdoch, Alison Krauss, and Rosie Thomas and Landon Pigg, who we co-managed together at our time at Nettwerk. Michael's career arc has had him circling around artist management throughout, and his insights into the business have become even more refined now that he's on the other side of the equation. Let's listen in now.
My name is Michael Corcoran. I work at a company called mtheory in Nashville, Tennessee. I have worked there for about 3 years, and prior to that, I was in management for about 15, working with artists like Alison Krauss, Michael Franti, Jars of Clay, Alexi Murdoch, Landon Pigg, and others.
Great. Thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. I think I mentioned to you before, the theme of this podcast previously has been around origin stories, but we're going to make a move into more of a series called Pivots, which kind of jumps off of the origin story management side of things and into other arenas in the music industry. Because now more than ever, actually, I just saw an article in Variety that was posted, I think, in the last few days about how so many, like even major executives have side hustles. As an artist manager, it seems like everyone either has a side hustle or has kind of moved into some other area of the industry. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of explore and talk to folks like yourself that have kind of had management as a background, probably still scratch some of that itch in the work that you do, but have kind of moved into another arena altogether. So, but to get us going, tell us a little bit about the beginning of your career. How did you get going in the music industry?
I started in the music business officially, I guess, in college. Prior to that, I grew up in New Jersey, just outside of New York City. So I was exposed to a lot of different types of music and was able to go to a lot of shows, particularly in high school when I was able to drive. Me and my friends would go. That was kind of when like the Horde Tour and the Lollapalooza and all these big traveling festivals were going around. So we had the opportunity to see a lot of great bands and also, radio was more diverse at that time. So we were just exposed to a lot. And so I became super interested in music. I think really in high school was when that solidified. And then in college, I came across a band called Guster at one night while I was out in New York at this club called the Wetlands, and went up to them after the show, started talking to them, became friends with them. And I was like, man, I would really love to get you guys to play at my college. And they're like, well, why don't you do that? And so I was like, okay, well, I'll go figure that out. And so I ended up, becoming the chair of our music programming committee at Villanova University in Philadelphia, and ended up booking not only Guster multiple times, but the other artists like The Roots and Blues Traveler and Real Big Fish and Squirrel Nut Zippers and String Cheese Incident and a whole host of random bands that probably some of which are still going, some of which are not. And then after college, the Guster guys, after a brief stint in the financial space, which I hated,
the Guster guys,
So I was a financial advisor for about 3 months, had all my certifications, and decided pretty quickly it wasn't for me, quit. And I think the day after I quit, I happened to be talking to the drummer from Guster, and he's like, well, why don't you, instead of like, you didn't take your summer off after college, why don't you come out with us, take your fall off and just hang out with us on the road, sell merch, do whatever we need. I'm like, sure, that sounds fun. And I had nothing tethering me to Philadelphia at the time. So went out on the road with those guys, and that led to about a 7-year stint with them where I started just kind of, slinging t-shirts and packing our van up to doing tour management and production management and accounting for them on the road. So that was my start, and then moved to Nashville in 2004, late 2004, and transitioned. Actually, you and I became very close around that time, and we jointly opened up the Nettwerk Management office here in Nashville, and because I really wanted to get off the road, and spent the better part of 5 years there with you, which was great, and then moved over to a company called Borman Entertainment, and worked with Alison Krauss and Michael Franti, and helped out with some other projects that they were working with at the time, and then about 3 years ago transitioned over to mtheory.
Yeah, no, that's quite the arc.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I was always impressed and a little envious that you spent so much time on the road. I honestly feel like, and I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but largely due to your experience as a tour manager going into management, I still think that's like the best boot camp for an artist manager in a lot of ways, just because you touch on every aspect of the artist. You're dealing with the artist day in, day out. When they're on the road, if they're incredibly active, in some respects, you're probably closer to the artist as a tour manager if they tour a lot than say the day-to-day manager even is. And to make that pivot is kind of a natural thing. I'm kind of surprised more tour managers don't, because you can also for the most part, most people don't really last more than what would you say, 7-8 years, maybe 10 years on the road before you get kind of burnt out.
I think that's true. And I think, the ones that have lasted forever have ended up in situations where they are extremely well taken care of. They're probably working with great people, getting paid, really well. But and I think some people just have that itch too, where they just cannot, they have to be on the road, and I found myself early in life feeling that way. And then kind of, wanting to kind of go into the more traditional management, which, again, there's so much travel involved with that it still kind of scratched the travel itch that I had, but it also allowed me to be home and start a family and all that stuff. So, which it's funny though, that you said like the kind of boot camp and envious. I just listened to this guy, Jim Miller, just did a podcast on Almost Famous, and hearing Cameron Crowe talk about how his sort of upbringing was, and really kind of being traveling and being around all the bands. And obviously it benefited him as a journalist. But I do agree. I think it gave me a really unique insight. And because I didn't just tour manage Guster, there were a handful of other artists that I was with at the time. And when Guster was off the road, they were my primary client. But like Ben Queller and Phantom Planet and others, and Dispatch. And it really gave me a unique insight into the artist's psyche. And like you said, we end up spending all of our time together. And so you really do get a sense for like what makes an artist tick, what's going to get them excited, what's going to get them inspired. And on the flip side, what's going to, make them unhappy, or, right. And I've found that in management, a lot of the most problematic situations arise from problems on the road, whether it's a crew member or a bus driver or whatever. I mean, there's so many little things that can trigger an artist becoming unhappy. And so I always sort of wear those glasses when I'm looking at, an artist situation, going, okay, what's going to make this person happy? What makes this person tick? And you can usually, a lot of that is revealed on the road.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Yeah. You and I first met actually when the artist I managed, Josh Rouse, was out touring with Guster. We did 2 stints together.
That's right.
Over a couple of years. And I actually I remember in 2004, I tried to hire you to go out on the road with Josh. And you're like, oh, I think I'm going to settle in Nashville and open an office for Nettwerk. And then shortly after that is when our mutual friend, who was actually, I think he was one of the first people to do a JV and kind of set up shop coming into Nettwerk, Dalton Sim actually kind of called me and kind of connected those dots.
Yes.
At the time, it was very serendipitous that all that happened.
It really was. And I was thinking about that the other day when when you guys had reached out about doing this, just how our paths crossed so many different times over the years. And then I remember literally sitting with you at Bongo Java, like talking about like, hey, can you go out on the road? I'm like, well, I'm sort of exploring this opportunity. And then lo and behold, like we're working together 6 months later, and all the,
Yeah.
working very closely, I'll say too, because, we did a lot, just both. We had to, I feel like, do the artist management thing, but also do the office management thing. And
Hmm.
especially early on, there was a lot involved in that.
Yeah, no, I love that. Was such a great, I guess that was kind of my boot camp. I mean, I was working with Josh for like 7 years by the time I came in the network, but I was so thirsty for camaraderie and some sort of community that, I remember my first day at the job there, we were putting together furniture in the office. And it
Yes.
was like, just to be able to do that was so thrilling, just to be out of the
Oh
house
yeah.
and around other people. And I learned, I call that era my, my kind of boot camp, I guess, in a way, because I learned so much more. I learned so much about putting records out and, like you were hinting at, like how to manage with people and staff in a larger company and how you intertwine with all those folks. I mean, the one thing that's always been fascinating to me, and I think Josh kind of taught me this when we would hire people to go on the road, whether it's musicians or a tour manager or whatever, is the personality component is so much more important maybe than any other aspect. I mean, obviously the talent, and we were both in Nashville at the time for a long time, and you still are, and the talent pool there is a given, whether it's industry or musicianship or whatever. So it's easy to kind of like just accept that, but the emotional stability and personality component is so much more important when you're
Agreed.
spending time around somebody and working with them. And I mean, even as an artist manager, when you work with someone, I mean, it's a weird, awkward relationship, where there's a lot of personal, emotional elements, typically intertwined in that. But that's just heightened when you're out on the road and essentially living with a group of people traveling
Yeah.
from place
I
to
mean,
place.
it's intrusive across the board, right? But it's
Right.
intrusive as an artist manager because you are super involved in that artist's everyday life. But then, you add a layer to that when you're, spending 24/7 together.
Yeah. And you're the guy knocking on the door at 6 a.m. to say, hey, got to get up. We got to go. Or, you
Yep.
know, dragging somebody to an in-store with 3 people and just feeling, completely exhausted for having to have gotten up and made that long drive for what essentially feels like a total waste of time. And
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I think that's where that experience as a tour manager really helps too. I mean, I think you and I both prescribed to this. I remember there's a few situations with Landon when we were working together with Landon where we had to put this into practices. And at one point, you don't want to ask your artist to do anything you wouldn't be willing to do. Like if it's uncomfortable for you and you don't have the gauge for that, you have to be willing to say no to certain people and protect your artist in certain circumstances, even if it leads to rough relationships and whatnot. It's like there's the business side, the marketing side of things, and then there's the human element of it that you have to take into account.
Yeah. Which I do think the industry has gotten a lot better with that side
Yeah,
of
you're
things
right.
over the last few years. I think there's been more of a recognition of the mental toll that an artist endures or an artist manager endures. And so, because you're right, like I think back in those late 2000, between 2005 and 8, when we were really hitting it hard there, it was, yeah, it was win at all costs and kind of, work hard and, at times work people into the ground. And, of course, our intention was not to like burn people out, but that was kind of the mentality. And you sort of, if you're not hustling, then you're not getting ahead. And I think there's much more awareness nowadays of, positive awareness of just how much you can really hurt and damage a person by doing that. And so it's been nice to see some of the organizations pop up recently that have really been designed to serve artists and managers and people in our business to kind of the mental health side of things.
Right. Yeah. No, it's definitely so crucial. And it's hard to acknowledge sometimes. It's hard to be cognizant of it, but it's so important. So did you get burnt out as an artist manager? Is that why you made the move?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I think there's no real easy way to say it other than that. I mean, it was a long, and I had an issue with, as an artist manager too, like you become very personally involved in an artist's life, and there are a lot of emotions in that. And I think one of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years is to really be able to separate the emotion from the actual work. And that's something I didn't do a great job of for the first, probably 15 years I was doing this. And I still, I think as an artist manager, you're kind of, it's almost a given. And I think it's a personality type of mine too, to want to sort of like get involved. If you're an Enneagram person, I'm an Enneagram 9. So it's like, I want to be a peacemaker and I want to make sure everybody's happy. And also I want to like figure out like how you tick and all this stuff, and really kind of get in and get dirty with the artist. And I think while that's very positive and served me really well, I think it was also led to a lot of like me taking on more than I should have, like, and more than is really, because this job, and you've probably talked about this on your podcast, it's unlike any job on the planet. Like you explain to your parents, like, what do you do? Like, well, it kind of, I don't know, like it's a lot of things. And it can involve like a 2 a.m. phone call, complaining that your hotel room's not right, or things, crazy things like that. And then the actual like job of like marketing an artist and putting out records. And so, for me, it was, I got burned out just emotionally and, just mentally. It was a lot, and I couldn't balance my personal life with my work life. And that's another thing about this job. It's just, you're pretty much always on, or have to be. And so I just didn't do a great job kind of separating those two things. And so I got to a place where I was like, you know what? I'm gonna step away from artist management. And I was looking at like going into the nonprofit world, and then my former coworker, Cameo Carlson, she had been talking with this company, mtheory, and she left the company the management company I was working with a year before I did, to set up the mtheory Nashville office. And mtheory is really, we call ourselves management services. So while we do a lot of the same things that I was doing before, we do it in a way that there's sort of this natural guardrail for me, where it's like, right, I'm not forward facing with the artist. I'm really talking with a manager and giving suggestions and recommendations and things like that. But I'm not so emotionally invested in it that if, hey, you don't like my idea, that's okay. That's fine. We'll move on to the next. And, so it's, whereas I feel a little bit of added pressure if it's like, you're really talking to the artist and like, you're truly on the hook for everything. And so, yeah, I just got burnt out, and here I am.
Sorry, it was a rough segue, I realize, but
no, it's because there's no easy way. I mean, that's really what happened without sugarcoating it. I just, and I think a lot of us get into that spot where it's like, you're trying to figure out like, okay, how do I sort of align my time, my energy, all that stuff. And I just was not, this was really on me. I just was not great at that. And there are times where I fall into that trap now, but.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of people that, probably came up in the industry around our time and have like stuck it out, like the only reason I have a few friends that have pivoted totally out of the industry, which I applaud and really love to see happen for a variety of personal reasons. But at this point, if you're still doing this, it's because you're really passionate about it. So it's still really hard to kind of strip away that emotional side, especially if you're programmed, having done management, gone through that, had that experience. No matter how great the artist is you're working with and how understanding they are, it's still hard to step away from that and not take it personally. I can relate to what you're saying as far as I haven't even thought about this, because I do still manage and do some consulting. So I still have, at least a little toe dipped into that, which I that relationship is great and I really love it. It's all the wonderful, awesome things I love about management. But I've also pivoted and work for a merch company now. And it's like, the one thing that I have to remind myself too is we're just selling shirts. It's like, this isn't a big deal. And the company itself is really catered around that. And it
Of
has a
course.
strong understanding about that, which I also really appreciate. But it's still hard not to feel. I was just the other day explaining when something kind of went a little sideways on something. It's just like, it was still hard for me to like not feel what that manager and artist was going through and their frustration. And, I think it's helpful to acknowledge that. And I'm sure they probably feel semi better about it. But then there's a other part of me. It's just like, I need to turn this off. And I have the opportunity to do that now
Yeah.
in a way that I haven't before, but it's still really hard to emotionally strip yourself of those kind of things in general. I mean, almost everybody that works in the industry now is either a frustrated musician or somebody that's really passionate about music. So
Yeah.
it's like, you just want, and you have these strong emotional relationships with the people you work with, and you just want to see the best. So when things go wonky, it's hard. It's hard to kind of do that, but it's nice to have that barrier. I actually really love what mtheory is set up to do, and in a lot of ways, it's kind of what Nettwerk was doing, with the
Yes.
various elements of the management, record label, publishing, merchandising. I mean, they had lanes of every aspect for the most part of the music industry, and it was great to tap into those expertise at times. But again, as the anchor being the manager, you never emotionally detach from that.
Right.
But the services you guys are providing to a manager is crucial, and you can be more focused on making those suggestions from a business marketing level without any of that emotion, which I'm
Correct.
sure has got to be good for you and really good for the manager too, because it's hard sometimes for you to as a manager strip that emotion away and actually just take really good solid advice and look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of our value proposition is we can sort of operate in this space pretty freely without, obviously we take into consideration the circumstance of the artist or the manager, but we can do it in a way that sometimes the manager, is unable to sort of see that forest from the trees. So we can come in and have it, bring in expertise from other genres or other artists that we've worked with and say, hey, look, we've seen this thing work over here. Maybe we should try a modified version of that with your artist. And I mean, we're purely services. So at the end of the day, we don't manage artists, and we don't really want to either. So it's that's the other part. It's like we don't want to be a threat to the manager in any way. We want to empower the manager and support them and raise them up. And we've worked with a lot of, we tend to work with smaller managers or management companies that are either kind of have an artist that's on an upward trajectory or building their business. And so it's really, for us, it's all about how do we accomplish that manager's goals and get them to the place they want to be.
Yeah. And from a services company, I'm sure you're developing not only long-standing relationships in the same way somebody would with maybe a publicist, on the service side, say 10, 15 years ago. So you're developing a long-term relationship with the artist, but you're also investing and assisting managers who work with several artists. So from a business development perspective, even outside of the individual work you do for a particular artist, it's like that's a really sound and smart approach. It takes away the pure management component of it.
Yep.
And gives you a wider sandbox to play in, but yet it's still playing off those kind of long-term relationships. If you're betting on good horses and see good results, it's probably long-standing
Exactly.
opportunities. So yeah, it's like management without any of the drama.
It is, and it is a very healthy place for me to be right now. I'll say that. It's been great, and we've been fortunate enough to work with some really great projects and really great managers, and so we've been very lucky and fortunate too.
No, that's awesome. So, like, out of curiosity, like, what is your typical, not day to day, but just project to project kind of vibe, being on that side of things? Like, do you guys work pretty much like on a continuous basis, or is it more album cycle tour related, or like how? I'm just out of curiosity. How does that?
No,
Work?
we pretty much work on and each manager that we work with is different, and they each have their idiosyncrasies. They have their workflow. They have what they're really good at. Like we work with a couple managers that are amazing at like A&R and creative, but they're terrible with organization and like the more marketing pieces. They really want to just live over here. And then we've got others that are hyper organized and all that stuff, and they need some help on the creative. And so, for us, it just, we don't work like on a project by project basis. So we're not like, hey, we're going to come alongside you for your album release. We're really like partnered with the manager across their artists, across their business in a nonstop kind of way. So even if they have like their main artist is off cycle, then we're still talking with them about what's next and how do we sort of keep the fans engaged and things like that. Cause that's part of what we want to do is like, we view an artist's career from a very holistic place. I mean, as you do as a manager, right? So you're like, okay,
right.
It's not just about this album coming out or this tour going out or anything like that. It's really like, how do we sort of create this thing where, and again, each artist, it looks different, but like, how do we create an environment where we're constantly engaging our fans and giving them the things that they want out of this artist? And how do we monetize that? All that kind of stuff. So from a day-to-day perspective, I'm probably working with 5 managers right now and talking with them all pretty much either daily or every other day, because most of them have a lot going on right now, and, just kind of how to build out their projects and roll them out. I mean,
right. How have you guys pivoted here in the last like 4 to 5 months since the pandemic? I mean, I imagine there's a lot of plans that I think I remember seeing you were out on the road with Tyler Chillers for a while, right? Doing some stuff. Correct. And it's like all that just kind of, unfortunately, had to shift.
We had, let's see, 85 shows on the books this year for him. And I think 13 played off. Wow. So it was, and a lot of his growth has been, really felt and experienced in the touring space. And so, but for a guy like Tyler, that gives him the chance. This has been like an amazing time because he's like at home in Kentucky, living off the land and really working he's home with his wife and spending time with other family and just really enjoying life. So it's been great for him. But for us, I think so much of our business, because I mean, the one thing that at mtheory that we're sort of a rev share thing. So again, we're not project by project. We don't do really retainer clients. And so it's really like our value proposition part of that too is like, hey, we're going to take a percentage of what the manager takes. So in good times when everybody's, winning and making money, we make money. But in those down times when you're planning for the next record or you're planning for the next tour, nobody's making any money, including us. And so I don't think of course we didn't foresee this pandemic being a part of that equation. But so, for us, it's been really digging deep with a lot of the managers and figuring out like, which artists are going to want to do like live streams, things like that. Because Tyler, is an example, has done nothing since this all went down. So, and doesn't really have an interest in doing anything. And it has seen his streams like nearly double in this like 6 months. It's crazy to me. Whereas other artists are super active. They're really engaged with their fans on a one-on-one level. And so it's just figuring out how to maximize the artist's time and the artist's energy in, trying to figure out what the best way to get a return on investment is. And, that can be through merchandise, that can be through, we're experimenting with like Cameo and things like that. So where an artist can like give shout outs to their friends. And, we have artists that are, exploring things on other platforms, TikTok and Twitch and all that stuff. So it's an interesting time. And I think you and I were talking before we started, like there are definitely going to be lingering things because of this pandemic that will carry on after this. And so I think the artists that are being innovative and figuring out, different ways that they can engage during this time are going to win. And, the others, I think too, it's like, to me, it's also like, what's coming next? Like beyond this, like, how do we set up for next year? How do we do something meaningful for whatever that artist or manager wants?
Right. Yeah, it is really interesting in a way. I think there's been a lot of technology that was probably taboo, like live streaming for the most part.
Yeah.
It was kind of frowned on, and, you mentioned Cameo, and that's another thing that I think most people would have probably steered away from. But now, like, all bets are off. Let's have fun. Let's try things. And I think there will be a lasting effect post all this. And also, it's interesting you mentioned, that Tyler's not doing anything. In some respects, that is a great playbook, to kind of go off of, because it's probably rejuvenating to him on a personal level. People are, still discovering him. And as soon as like people start touring again, based on my understanding of where he was at, I think turning that back on will be at least at that level, if not higher, potentially, just simply because there's going to be, a desire to see him perform. And, people will want to gravitate towards that in general.
I do. I think, and I do. I also think that, for a guy like him, it wouldn't feel authentic to who he is to do some of the stuff that you see other artists doing. Whereas for those artists, it's like second nature. They're out there. Like within our company, we work with an artist named, or a group named Sophie Tucker, and like they've literally done a live stream every single day since March 15th, every day. And like they have been a part of every big live stream festival, things like that, because that's kind of their thing. And they've developed like a really cool, they do like a DJ set every day a 40-minute DJ set, and it's like people love it. And it's perfect for them. Tyler would be like
oh, that's hilarious. No, it's definitely creatively trying to find that word. I think for a lot of people, they're probably discovering things they didn't even think they had in them, and then there's opportunities too, I think, for fans to engage in a way that I think is really personable and makes a different kind of connection. I mean, seeing somebody perform in their bathroom for a late night television show is kind of endearing in a way.
It is.
It's just like there's something that's really,
yeah.
Or even, I think for St. Patrick's Day early in this, Bono wrote a song and performed it, and just on like an iPhone video, and it was crappy and he looked horrible, but it was so endearing. You could see the power of his voice, the thrill, and gleam in his eye, performing the song he just wrote. And it's like, you don't see that typically, from certain artists. So that kind of naked component of it, I think, when done right and sparingly, can be really powerful. Yeah. So maybe there's a mix of all that in the future,
There is. And I think all that to say, I think right now is a really tricky time to be a super developing artist, because you don't have a lot of the normal tools in your toolbox. That, you can't go out and do a radio tour. You can't go out and do a press tour. You can't do late night TV. I mean, for the most part. And so, I think that sort of that up and coming class is sort of having to wait, or it's definitely slower than it was in the past. Your ability to discover stuff, and not to mention, all of the news and political noise, competing with that is trickier than ever. I mean,
yeah. I mean, hopefully next year, 2021, will bring more opportunity there as things begin to kind of normalize and open up. I will say there has been an onslaught of amazing records in music that's been put out over the last several months that has been incredibly comforting and exciting for me. And also just revisiting things that I hadn't listened to in a long time too has been really comforting.
I have definitely gotten nostalgic during this time. I mean, there's definitely, like the older, like Creeper Lagoon, Josh Rouse. I mean, there's so many things that I've gone back to, like favorite records from, the mid 90s and beyond, that I'm just like, oh gosh, it gives me comfort. And like the nostalgic factor is it plays well for my personality.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that for sure. No, that's fantastic. So what do you miss most about managing?
Gosh, I actually, I mean, truthfully, I am in such a good spot that I don't really miss a lot. I mean, I still have enough artist interaction to kind of, again, scratch that itch for me. I still, in normal times, obviously not now, but the travel is still there for me. I do think there's, I guess, part of what we do. I mean, and by design, we're sort of in the background. And so it's, I think one of the things, like as the artist manager, and this is, part of the blessing and the curse, is that there's some, you do get some more glory than my current status. But, I'm a little fine with sacrificing the glory for the
sanity,
behind the scenes sanity. Yes, that's the great word. So, and again, I think, and we work differently with other, managers across the board. Like some of them are very like, we do have like some line with the artist. Some of them we just kind of coach the manager. So, I think probably the best example was that we worked on the Casey Musgraves Golden Hour project, and we had that was an amazing project to work on, and we did have some visibility with her, and it was fun to go to the Grammys, but we weren't also like hanging out at all the after parties.
Right.
So, maybe that's what I miss. I don't know. I'm really, truthfully though, happy and kind of don't miss, because again, I still get the artist itch. I can talk to artists all the time if I want to. And we do take a lot of meetings directly with artists that may be looking for teams, and we can kind of help advise them on that, but pretty happy where I am actually.
No, that's great. That actually leads nicely into my next question. So being in this, position where you're working with a variety of different managers, what are some of the, I guess, more predominant qualities that you feel make a really good manager now that you're seeing it from a different perspective?
I mean, I think, and it's kind of something you said earlier too. It's the managers that understand who the artist is, what their goal is, and like can act on that. I mean, it sounds simple, but there are some really smart people in our business that are terrible managers because they, there's a part of this that is so much personality driven, and like harnessing that personality in a way that's productive is a really unique skill set. And so it's because it's not like there's this checklist and you say, okay, if we do these 5 things, then this is going to happen. Right. It's really like understanding every nuance of the artist and like figuring out what the best opportunities for that artist are. To use the Casey example, Jason Owen is like, I mean, he is truly like a magician. He's unbelievable with artists. And he works with some amazing artists in so many different genres. Like he's just incredible. And I think he is able to really tap into their creative side, understand how to translate that creative to commerce in a way that, very few do. And so he's an example of somebody that, again, I think that ability to really understand what the artist is trying to say and translating that into actionable, profitable ways is probably the biggest thing. I mean, I think same with Tyler's manager is a guy named Ian Thornton, and he knows Tyler through and through. He knows what Tyler's going to say before Tyler says it, almost that kind of thing. So
yeah,
it's that closeness. And again, that's a blessing and a curse, right? They're like brothers too. So it's, there's definitely moments where it's like, okay, he's not talking to me right now or whatever, those kinds of things. And so, but at the end of the day, Ian also has Tyler's back in a way that like, you bring in super big manager guy and it's like, does it work the same way? I don't know. Like, I don't think so. And I think that there's something to be said for artists that truly are out to like help that artist achieve their creative vision.
Yeah. I think those kind of relationships often do, to your point, get, miscalculated in a way. Like, just because it looks good on paper and so has done this before and they can do it again for me isn't always as, successful as just sticking it out and battling through, growing pains together and growth in general as a team versus, always looking for whatever potentially could be better next. Yeah, the other thing that jumped out at me as you were talking about Casey's last record and career in general is like how it must be challenging but also invigorating to be so bold to say, we're just going to, like, screw it, we're just going to go and do what we want to do, and we'll figure it out as we go, and we're going to go against the grain. And there's something freeing in that, and a little bit scary, but that's almost as close to a recipe of potential, at least creative success.
Yep.
But also has, one could argue, maybe a more of an opportunity to have commercial success too, if done right and for the right reasons.
Yep. I think if you're able to channel that artist authenticity and everything, I think you could. And, the Casey thing was amazing because, I mean, first of all, we heard the record and I was like, I turned to Cammy and I was like, is this as good as I think it is? I mean, this was a couple of months before it was released, and Jason brought us in and he's like, I want you guys to help me get this out of the country lane because this is not a country record. And, Casey wants to play in Japan, and she wants to play Coachella and things like that would normally for a country artist would not be available to her, or not,
Right.
certain, like there's no, anyway. So that was a big thing for us of like, kind of throwing the playbook out the window and just like really forging our own path and going, like you said, against the grain. And she was super committed to it. And, again, believed in it in a way that we all did too, but she had a very clear vision for the record and a very clear aesthetic for the record. And it was kind of this lightning in a bottle moment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which kind of brings us back to, I guess, really the cornerstone to doing management in general, which is you just have to have great artists that at least have to have some ability to articulate what lane they want to be in, and own that enough that you can articulate that alongside them and build and grow on that. That's just such a rare thing to run into.
It is. And you can offset some of that stuff with hard work. And that's the other quality of the managers that we see that are successful, is that they're all like really hard workers and they care deeply about this business and they care deeply about their artists. So yeah, I mean, but no amount of work can offset like a lack of vision or a lack of like creativity, because yeah, like you said, at the end of the day, like an artist with a strong point of view is they're gonna have a leg up, at least at this stage.
Yeah, and it's what a fan will react to. It's that emotional connection that a fan ultimately reacts to. It's not necessarily the positioning that goes around it.
Yep.
Although that can be important too, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, to round us out here, I'm starting this kind of little segment called Lightning Round Questions, just to kind of like bring it all down. So you don't have to go too in depth with these if you don't like.
I won't.
But it's just kind of fun to have some consistency on the question front. So this is kind of jump around a little bit, but what was the first record you remember buying?
The first record I remember buying, I mean, this is going to sound funny, but Michael Jackson Thriller.
Okay.
So that was the first record that I can remember buying. I remember going into like Record World and getting it there. I think the first meaningful record I remember buying, even though Thriller is, look.
Yeah, it's a classic, but yeah.
It's an incredible record, right? But, and aside from some of the hair metal stuff that they bought in the mid 80s, I think the first record that really like, okay, like this does something to me differently than some of the other stuff, that was Joshua Tree.
Oh yeah, man, definitely.
So that was the first one. And then, there was like Pearl Jam 10. When I first bought that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, so many records like that. But I think Joshua Tree was really like the first kind of like, let's say like critically cool record that I got, that I was like, okay, this is hitting me differently than all this other stuff.
Well, we'll have to talk about this for a quick second then, though. Did you buy it when it came out? Like, were you familiar with U2, like enough to kind of like jump right into it?
No, so it was more of like I was introduced to it by MTV, right? And so
Mhm.
I knew like some of the history of YouTube, but I was too young to really appreciate the like early mid 80s YouTube stuff. And then Joshua Tree was really kind of that. I was like, oh, okay, like um I think Where the Streets Have No Name, like the video of that was like, oh, like it was just that I was like, okay, what's this? So
Yeah, yeah,
I got it.
definitely. I remember seeing them on Live Aid live, when it was on
Yes.
MTV. And
Yes.
that was so, to hear them play bad and to see that performance kind of piqued my interest. And then I went back a little bit, and so, in some respects too, I think The Unforgettable Fire was a transitional record for them,
Yes.
for people that came to them later in their beginning of their career. I mean, it was obviously the purist in the early days, which I get, but I think, yeah, I remember riding my bike down to our local record store and buying Joshua Tree on cassette and riding home and playing it nonstop. It was
That
definitely
was
a
my
pivotal record for
transfer,
me.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That was like what, 87, 88? Like, cause
yeah,
I,
87.
yeah,
Mhm.
87. Okay. Cause I was still living in Virginia at the time. Yep. There you
Yeah,
go.
those are two great records for sure. What was the
Lightning round is over. No.
we'll have to be quicker on these.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, what was the first concert you went to
So the
that was
first
meaningful?
concert, okay. So my first concert was the Jackson 5 Victory Tour, which coincided with the
Oh, okay.
Thriller record. So that was one. I went and saw Pink Floyd when I was in 7th grade with my friend's older brother at RFK Stadium in DC, and that was the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour, and
Hmm.
that was the one that I was like, okay, I like this too.
Yeah, that was quite a show, no doubt, to get hooked on.
Yeah,
That's awesome. I think I saw them on the tour after that record.
the Division Bell. So
Ye-
my buddies and I in high school went to several of those too.
yeah. Oh, that's great. Um, what was the last concert you went to before everything got
So
shut
oddly
down?
enough, the last concert that I saw before all this shutdown was March 10th or 11th. It was Guster at the Belcourt Theater here. They did their acoustic,
Oh, right.
like they had an improv comedian sort of moderate the night. It was a really cool format. It was awesome. And I remember at the show, like it was like, oh, something's happening here, and like we went out afterwards and they're like, we're not supposed to touch or anything or hug or whatever. And yeah, that was it.
Wow. Oh man. No, that's a full circle moment
It
there.
really was. And then my wife, we went to Rustin Kelly the weekend before at the Ryman too. So that was like hers. And she's like, that was a great last one to go out on if we're going to go out.
Yeah. No, that's great. They'll come back.
They'll come
It'll be
back.
okay. Well, soon I'll be able to add what was the first show you got to see
Yes.
after the pandemic?
Yes.
We'll get there for sure. What's something you've discovered recently, music wise, that's just like blown you away?
I was preparing for this question and it's been hard. Like I have not dug into like the Phoebe Bridgers record, I think is my favorite record of this year. Like
Yeah.
that record I love. I think that's just a fantastic album. Um, I will say that there's not been, gosh, blown away is tough because I don't think I mean the Phoebe record has blown me away, but I don't know that there's anything else recently there's been several great records that have come out, but nothing that's like truly like shaken me.
Yeah. No, but I tend to agree with you. I think that record is going to have a lot of life in it. It's going to stand up really, really well. Um, and it's a strong second effort, I
It
mean, it
is
makes
so
you,
good.
yeah, in this era, I think there's a handful of artists that are just so already down a certain lane. They're
Yeah.
being so consistent with the work they do that you could just see and want to see and hear another 10 to 12 records out of over the
Yeah.
next, 15, 16 years and hope that continues. Um, yeah. And the one thing I'll say about the age we're in now too, which makes that question a little complicated in a sense is that, you can discover anything at any time now. Like
Yeah.
you could go back several years or decades and discover something that's really amazing that is equally as relevant nowadays, in a way that I think it hasn't really, pre-streaming era wasn't really as palpable, but it definitely is now.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I think the pandemic will also hopefully shine a light on, is an opportunity to discover stuff that's maybe not current, but
Yeah.
worth your time and attention. So one last question. What do you like to do outside of music?
Outside of music, I like to spend time with my family, really. I've been coaching baseball, so we've actually been doing baseball, which is so strange.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so here in Nashville, they're crazy, and with proper social distancing among the parents, we just finished up like what was basically supposed to be the spring season. It was condensed into about 6 weeks over the summer, and I helped coach both my kids were on teams, and I helped coach both the teams, and so that's been really fun. And that's actually been a nice distraction from all this. Like, it's helpful to kind of say, okay, at 5:00 we're going to head to the ball field and go play baseball. And so
that's awesome. That's so good. Cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Happy to, Chris, and happy to do it, and look forward to catching up proper soon.
Many thanks to Mike for joining us in this inaugural episode of our new Pivot season. If you're so inclined, please rate us, follow us, or like us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Tough Love Pod. That's TOUGHLOVEPOD. And above all, share this podcast with all your friends and fellow music industry and artist communities. It takes a village. You can reach us at CHRIS at Anhedonia Management, ANHEDONIAMGMT.com. Be well, trip up, get back up, and let's all learn as we go. Until next time.